We've got the New Orleans Saints heading to Los Angeles to take on the Rams as 4-point underdogs. The total is set at 46. This is Showdown coverage brought to you by sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. And before we jump over to DraftKings, let me remind you to use promo code ANGLES to get 15% off your subscription at sharpfootballanalysis.com. If you are out of the fantasy football playoffs or you're just looking to transition into some other form of gambling because you have you've won your championship, whatever it may be. um, this is your opportunity to get into the betting sphere. Go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com, subscribe, get 15% off using promo code angles, and get your betting advice over there. So let's jump over to DraftKings for this really fun slate. So this slate is going to be really tough not to teeter-totter on. It's actually a really good game. Two 7-7 teams, but two teams that can actually play some okay football, and a lot of playoff implications on the line for this one. So it's actually pans out to be one of our better Thursday night games that we've seen this season. But you have the Saints who they've passed the 30-point threshold a couple times this season, but the Rams are doing it consistently of late. So if you had to pick one team, and of course the Rams are 4-point favorites at home, if you do have to pick one team that you think could pass that 30-point threshold, it's probably going to be the Rams. But the reason it's so difficult to really take a stand on the Rams is that their Saints counterparts are just significantly cheaper across the board. You've got Alvin Kamara, who is cheaper than Kyren Williams and Cooper Kupp. You have Chris Olave, who's cheaper than Puka Nacua. You have Derek Carr, who is cheaper than Matthew Stafford. And all in all, those players, their median projections compare favorably to their counterparts. So it does make some sense to play the Saints, even though normally you really want to start by saying, I'm probably going to build around the 4-point home favorites. In the end, I probably will still build around the Rams, and that's because I like all of their primary options in the captain spot more than any of the Saints options. So at the end of the day, if you're going to be building your 20 max around three captains, maybe four captains, but usually you want to stick with around three for your 20 maxes, then you're probably going to want to build around the team that is involved with your captain. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Kyren Williams is there at the top with 11,200, but Cooper Kupp's not far behind. The thing about Cooper Kupp is just that Puka Nacua is so much cheaper, 1,400 cheaper, and is getting similar workload, similar target share in the offense, has a similar ceiling this year, has had a better ceiling than Cooper Kupp at times. So it gets kind of difficult to click on Cooper Kupp over Puka Nacua when you really could use the savings on this slate. So Puka Nacua is going to be my favorite option over Kupp. I would still consider Kupp in the captain spot, but it's between Kupp and Stafford for me right now, and we'll get to that in a moment. So back to Kyren Williams there at 11,200, most expensive player of the slate, but the safest volume on the slate. He's going to be involved as a receiver. He's going to be involved on the ground. Massive, massive upside. A lot of times you haven't been gravitating towards the running backs at captain this season, but Kyren Williams is in a really good spot. He's kind of Travis Etienne-esque, and then in a way, kind of a bit of a better workload, really, as insane as that is to say. Think about that starting the season, that Kyren Williams would be having a better workload than Travis Etienne, but that's kind of how I view him. But Travis Etienne is always a staple of my Jaguars builds, just because it takes a game script element out of it, because I know that he'll be involved. And that's the same thing with Kyren Williams. I don't really need to worry about if it's a 17 to 14 stinker, which it certainly could be, because he'll still be utilized plenty regardless of game script. So if I have to pick between Kyren Williams and Cooper Kupp at that price range, I'm going Kyren Williams. If I have to pick between Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for my favorite Rams captain, going Puka Nacua. Could Cooper Kupp make that look very silly? Yeah, obviously. So getting into Alvin Kamara at 10,800. It's a nice little discount. I mean, 400 you don't think is a lot, but then when you get into building on this slate, the salary is really tight because it is so top heavy in the way that this slate projects. So the 400 does kind of make a difference, and Alvin Kamara certainly could go blow for blow with Kyren Williams. I kind of like fitting them both in the lineups, knowing that neither of them are really game script dependent. So I really don't mind fitting Kyren Williams and Alvin Kamara in the lineups just to get kind of crazy because once you get to that point, it's going to be really tough. I mean, you're going to probably fit one of the quarterbacks in as well, but then you're going to have a pretty unique lineup from there. So that's just something to consider. A lot of times people won't want to play two running backs from the same game, especially when they're both extremely expensive. That's one way you could approach the slate, and they both have the best projectable volume of the slate. So Matthew Stafford at 10,000 is super reasonable. Now he is 1,000 more than Derek Carr, but I have a lot more faith in Matthew Stafford having a sort of 300-yard, 3 touchdown performance over Derek Carr having that same performance. It is worth noting next is Chris Olave. It is worth noting that Derek Carr's primary receiver and Chris Olave is coming off of injury. Didn't practice this week, but is expected to play. Doesn't even have a questionable tag, so that's good going into tomorrow. We don't have to worry about whether or not Chris Olave is going to play. But then, of course, Michael Thomas hasn't been around for a few weeks as well. So you have Rashid. I'm going to get it wrong, which Shaheed is 7,000, which is more expensive than what you would typically like for the Saints' second receiver. Even Michael Thomas was, I believe Michael Thomas was 7,600 when he was having a pretty nice little run there during the season before his injury. So it just kind of is uncomfortable to play Shaheed. Like when you start building a lineup and you're spending so much of your salary on Derek Carr, Chris Olave, and Shaheed, and then you don't have enough salary left over to get two of Kyren Williams, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, you find yourself in a pretty tough spot. So I'll probably avoid Shaheed, and then Taysom Hill, as fun as he is to play at tight end, probably going to avoid him as well at 6,600. He's priced as a backup quarterback, even though he's listed as a tight end, just because that's how it works with him. Tyler Higbee at 5,800 is interesting because he is in a price range that is going to be unpopular. He will probably come in at a pretty low roster percentage relative to the rest of the Rams. So he's a nice contrarian option in large field tournaments, but he's not necessarily. I mean, he's not even projected anywhere close to hitting value on 5,800. So not somebody that I'm looking to prioritize in like small field, single entry stuff. Not too interested in Tyler Higbee, but for large field, just for the sake of saying, hey, I do want to build around the Rams, but I need to figure out how to get unique somewhere. You can certainly do that with Tyler Higbee. You get down here to Jamaal Williams. So they will be without Kendre Miller. Jamaal Williams will be handling the bulk of the backup duties once again. 4,200 is a nice price for Jamaal Williams. I do not mind sprinkling him in even midfield tournaments. Jamaal Williams is a phenomenal option. Alvin Kamara has been handling the bulk of the workload, but Jamaal Williams has been known to punch in a couple touchdowns in a single game, and his workload should probably go up a touch. Um, I'm getting news. So Kendre Miller was upgraded to limited participation in practice. So he is questionable. Okay. That is Adam Kaplan on Twitter. Okay. I appreciate that. So is questionable. I had him as out. So that would definitely make a difference. Zero interest in either Jamaal Williams or Kendre Miller if Kendre Miller is active. Of course, if Kendre Miller is not active, revert back to Jamaal Williams being a nice target in mid to large field tournaments as somebody with 2 touchdown upside. Juwan Johnson at 4,000s. He's like I always go back to Noah Gray because Noah Gray's been my favorite for so long. So my barometer for cheap tight ends is like, are you better than Noah Gray? Are you worse than Noah Gray? And then I compare the salaries to that. So Juwan Johnson, I would rather see around like 2,600, 2,800, and then I can be excited about Juwan Johnson. When you get to 4,000 and I only need to find 600 to get up to one of the kickers, then I'm probably just going to go with one of the kickers because the roster percentage will be similar anyways. It'll be around 20%, whether you go Juwan Johnson or you go groupie. So I'm just going to go with the kicker probably in most instances. If it's super large field and I've got Derek Carr in the lineup, things change a little bit. I'll go Juwan Johnson. But if we're just talking small field stuff and I need two Saints to go with my Rams 4x2, just give me the kicker. Give me the kicker, and I'll take my 10 points hopefully, and feel really strong about that, especially if it's a low scoring game. You have A.T. Perry stepping into a reasonable sized role with the Saints, but I'm not too terribly interested in Perry because you have Tutu Atwell down there at 2,800, and that reminds me that we did skip over Demarcus Robinson, and Demarcus Robinson is up there at 5,400. So I missed Robinson, but Robinson has played a significant role for the Rams in the past couple weeks, and he's been even better than the box score has demonstrated, actually, because he's getting multiple red zone targets. I think they targeted him 2 plays in a row, if I recall correctly, from Sunday. Definitely at least once on a free play last week that I remember seeing. So it is interesting that Tutu Atwell has been kind of pushed to the side, but he's still getting enough run to be considered at 2,800, especially if you're heavily stacking the Rams. Definitely still interested in Tutu Atwell at 2,800. But like I mentioned earlier, you don't have a ton of value on the slate that I'm really interested in. So that's why the $400 really matters. And we'll see when we get into building in just a second. It's a really, really tight slate. You have some guys like Royce Freeman at 2,600, kind of worth considering, right? But Kyren Williams, I think, has played 100% of the snaps at times this year, and he's definitely liable to get up there to 85 to 90%. So do you really go with Royce Freeman when you could go with Tutu Atwell and hope that you get a long bomb? Really, you don't really like going with either of them, so you have to try to stay in the cheap price range. That's why Chris Olave kind of intrigues me as captain if I weren't so dead set on stacking the Rams, because he is 8,600. He can you can squeeze in Saints 2x4s, so 2 Saints, 4 Rams. You would have Chris Olave at captain, Derek Carr in the flex, and then 4 Rams. And you might be able to squeeze that in because Chris Olave is pretty cheap. But the issue with that is that just doesn't it doesn't hit very often. It certainly feels viable in this slate, but it doesn't hit very often. So I'll take the question, Matt. And then since we just talked about Chris Olave, we'll start with him at captain too. Let me build that in. Okay, Chris Olave at captain. And of course, we have to go with Derek Carr. So with Derek Carr in the flex, Chris Olave at captain. Going to get to the question in just a second. So Chris Olave, captain, Derek Carr on the flex, and then we have to try to get these Rams in, and this is why it gets so difficult so fast. I want Kyren Williams in as many lineups as I can, and you can already see my average salary is going down to 5,600. That takes me out of Matthew Stafford already. Can be done a 4x2 without the quarterback, not normal. So we're going to go ahead and try to do that, which means we're definitely going to want the Rams in our lineup. So this is already going to get to like a midfield tournament kind of thing. Demarcus Robinson would be fine, and that leaves 7,700. Like Shaheed maybe, and then you've got a 3x3. That's a fine 3x3, and 3x3 is not the worst thing on this slate either. I typically stay away from 3x3s, but on this slate where price is so tight, like I cannot stress enough how tight salary is going to be on this slate. I'm okay with going 3x3s because you can get kind of weird with it, like we did on this in this lineup. So you have Chris Olave at captain, Derek Carr, Kyren Williams, Rams, Demarcus Robinson, and Shaheed. So the question is, Adam, you used to do content for another sim site. Robinson will take a hit with Tutu back. No, yes, I did. I used to work with Run the Sims. Still love that site. And Robinson will take a hit with Tutu back, but the amount that he's been involved over the past 2 weeks, I do feel like he kind of solidified his role, and I do think that's kind of why he was priced that way because Tutu was, I believe, known to be back before salaries came out. I could be wrong on that one, but I think that Demarcus Robinson kind of did earn the $5,400 price tag for this slate. So in that sense, if you, like me, believe that Demarcus Robinson earned a more solidified role, you really like him at 5,400 because his roster percentage will be pretty low. So I do like trying to fit Demarcus Robinson in there with Tutu back. And like I mentioned earlier, whether Demarcus Robinson's has a huge role or not, I still like Tutu Atwell at 2,800 because of the way that he can score his fantasy points and because of the fact that I need to find unique ways to get to Ram stacks because as we saw in the first build we put together, it's really hard to get 4 Rams. And even though you know you want 4 Rams in your lineup because you expect them to win, I do. I think that the Rams have the best shot at getting to 30, so I expect them to win and be the better offense with a better ceiling. It's clear that you have to get creative in doing that. So another thing that I wanted to explore before we got out of here was Matthew Stafford at captain, because I think with Kyren Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua, first of all, Puka Nacua is only 9,600, and his median projection is going to be right around Stafford's. So you save 400 there. I think that Puka Nacua is going to have a more popular roster percentage than Stafford. But then also, of course, Kyren Williams and Cooper Kupp are names that people are going to be really excited to click on. So Matthew Stafford could come in with sub 10% roster percentage, and people haven't been as keen on stacking quarterbacks this year as they have in years past. It worked for me last week with Jared Goff. That worked really well with Jared Goff, and I happened to have him heavily stacked with Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So really similar to what we're trying to do tonight. So let's go ahead and throw Matthew Stafford at captain. And then we want to stack him with Puka Nacua and probably go down to, we'll try Robinson and actually maybe Tutu as well. We might not need to do this, but let's just give it a shot. And then I really like Chris Olave at his price, and I want to see how much is left. I was hoping I could get to Derek Carr here, but I cannot quite get to Derek Carr, and I don't really have. Here goes back to not having a ton of options that are cheap on this slate. I don't really have a viable drop from Demarcus Robinson unless I go either Rams kicker, which I don't usually love to do with captain quarterback, or I could do Rams defense. Still not something I'm necessarily thrilled about, but I don't hate it either because we'll get to that in a second. Let me click Rams and then throw Derek Carr in there. And then talk about that for a moment. Sorry, I went Saints. Okay, so the reason I want to talk about this is because this breaks a rule that a lot of people will probably implement into their optimizer. And whenever I can do that viably, I do want to do that because it's going to create a unique lineup and make me less likely to be duped, etc. So having Derek Carr in the same lineup as the Rams defense, something that optimizers don't usually want you to do. But since Derek Carr is pretty cheap, Chris Olave is super cheap, I don't mind it on the slate. And also Derek Carr could easily just throw a pick six and then be fine the rest of the game. Like that's something well within his range of outcomes. So this is a lineup I more prefer, but it does highlight how difficult it is to get to your Rams stacks. And then it also shows like I can't, even if I take Puka Nacua out, I don't think I have enough money to even, I can't even get to Cooper Kupp or Kyren Williams. So that just goes to show you, yes, everybody's going to want to play for Rams, but it's not going to be easy to get to it. So if you can find that magical puzzle piece to fit your 4 Rams together, you're going to have a leg up on this slate. So before we get out of here, this is Matthew Stafford at captain, Puka Nacua, Rams defense, Tutu Atwell, Chris Olave, and Derek Carr. So that's going to do it for today's Showdown coverage brought to you by sharpfootballanalysis.com. Thank you all so much for coming out, and we will catch you all next week. Peace.